Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, dozens more confirmed cases of coronavirus are diagnosed in Israel, raising the number to an estimated 340 and counting. President Rivlin officially hands Benny Gantz of the Blue and White Party the first mandate to form a coalition, and Israelis get really creative in adapting to life under coronavirus restrictions. So stay tuned because it's amazing. Over 100 cases of coronavirus have just been diagnosed in Israel. 5 of those diagnosed are reported to be in serious condition, while 13 are in moderate condition. But over 90% of those who have been infected with the coronavirus in the state of Israel have light symptoms. ILTV's Natasha Kirchuk reports with more.
The IDF has identified one of the newly diagnosed corona patients as a career soldier who contracted the virus from another infected person, making him or her the 5th service member to be diagnosed with the disease. A mother and baby have also just been separated immediately after birth, after the mother tested positive for coronavirus in Jerusalem's Hadassah hospital. The woman had been in home quarantine and was brought into a specialized isolation unit to give birth. But after the baby was born, tests revealed that the 35-year-old mother was in fact a carrier of the virus. Right now, she is in the hospital's isolation ward, but is being surrounded by love, warmth, and photos of her newborn baby. These latest cases come after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his closest aides have also undergone testing for the virus to be on the safe side. Israeli President Rivlin has also just been tested. An estimated 40,000 Israelis are in quarantine, and with new regulations banning schools from opening and forcing many businesses to shutter, locals are concerned about what the future holds.
This morning we have to figure out what to do with our children and what to do with our businesses, with our workers, because they have their children in their home as well. And we need to figure out who's supposed to go home, what we're supposed to do with our life, staying at home when both parents are working, and so it's a bit problematic.
Places of leisure including malls, restaurants, bars, dance clubs, beauty salons, amusement parks, and pools have been ordered to close for the coming 5 weeks, and bans on gatherings of more than 10 people have also been enacted. But despite instructions for major heritage sites to shutter, some Israelis are finding ways around the rules.
רחבת הכותל המערבי, גם במצב הזה, תישאר פתוחה. וכמובן פועלים לפי הוראות משרד הבריאות, כאשר כל קבוצה, כל מניין, יהיה לו שטח שלו, שבו הוא יתפלל, ויהיה הפרדה בין מקום למקום במרחק של 2 מטר.
As of now, there have been rumors that the entire state of Israel will be entering a full lockdown, but the health ministry and the Israeli government haven't yet made that announcement.
As more and more Israelis contract the coronavirus disease, local doctors are complaining that they have insufficient protective equipment to treat patients with the deadly illness. 18 Israeli medical professionals have already contracted the disease so far, and a senior official in the health ministry is railing against his organization for failing to ensure a sufficient supply of protective gear, like masks, gloves, and hazmat suits. But as the panic continues surrounding the outbreak, one Israeli virologist is urging the public to remain calm. Professor Jihad Bishara, director of the infectious disease unit at Israel's Beilinson Hospital, says that the virus is not airborne. Most people who are infected will recover without even knowing they're sick, and the at-risk groups are now known, that the global panic is exaggerated. Explaining on Israel's Channel 12 News, he says people are thinking that the virus is airborne, that it's going to attack everyone and that anyone infected will die. But that's not true. The infection spreads via droplet transmission, so only if you're close to an infected person and you get their saliva when they sneeze or cough can you get ill. It's not in the air. Not everyone who's infected dies, and most infected people will recover without even knowing they were ever sick. Moving on, new directives to protect the country's economy are also being updated regularly. as Israel implements even more restrictions surrounding the coronavirus pandemic, the Israeli economy is taking a hit. But it looks like the finance ministry has just reached an agreement to provide $817 million in relief for businesses that are feeling the heat most. Under the latest outline, most payments to the government will be postponed, including value-added taxes, income and property taxes, and electricity and water bills. These measures are still pending approval by the Prime Minister, though, and they would most likely take effect until the end of April or mid-May. Self-employed workers would receive compensation of between $1,000 to $1,900 each, which would add up to a total national distribution of $68 million. And the Israeli government is also stepping up its loans to small businesses and easing trade regulations. Government workers in non-essential departments will be placed on leave under terms that have not yet been decided. The Bank of Israel is also now taking a series of measures to mitigate damage to the economy caused by the spread of the virus. The bank will be buying government bonds at different maturities in the open market to help counteract the volatility in the market. And Israel's banks will also be offering a delay in mortgage payments for a few months, loans to small and mid-sized businesses, and expanded digital services for remote transactions. Now, in order to better track the spread of the coronavirus in Israel, the government has now approved the use of cell phone tracking technology on confirmed coronavirus patients in quarantine. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu has greenlit plans to use anti-terror surveillance technology on the entire general Israeli public. And within just 24 hours of the initial push, the Justice Ministry has signed off on the idea. But many are concerned over privacy and civil liberty violations. While the Prime Minister's office insists that the plan would only allow limited access to data and that the power would expire at the end of 30 days, and all that remains before implementation then is for final approval to be given by the Knesset Subcommittee on Clandestine Services. Still, where do you draw the line between public freedoms and public safety? Joining us to discuss via Skype is CEO and co-founder of cybersecurity company Safehouse, Liad Herman. Liad, thank you for joining us. Now, let's just start with the how. How can civilians be tracked this way? In what way is the technology used?
So today the government talks about digital means. But what does that actually mean? Starting from cell phone tracking, from cell towers to GPS tracking, towards something more severe, like going into the where do you browse the web, how do you browse the web, and so on. I believe that currently they're speaking about cell phone tracking to find out where coronavirus infected people were physically, and then alerting other people that were around them. But as you said, it's a fine line between how do we use it and if and when should we use it.
Sure. So is there a way maybe in which citizens can protect their privacy to a degree? You know, like who protects our rights really against cyber attacks and misuse of this type of data?
So today in Israel, you have two laws. You have the Chok Ha'azanot Seter, which is a wiretapping law, which makes sure that the government will only wiretap if there is a security need. And there is a Haganat HaPratiyut law, the privacy law, which makes sure that nobody can use your private information. Now, of course, in this kind of emergency, the government sees fit to create special means to track us, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, they're doing it mostly to protect us. I think the biggest concern here is the slippery slope of who is going to use it and when things go out of hand. Now, for us, the citizens, we need to be smart about it, meaning how can we make sure that we will give the information we want to. So if we walk around the street, should we or shouldn't we carry a cell phone? If we use the internet, we should use means that give us privacy and security. It's not only the government. The last 2 days alone in Safehouse, we've seen a spike of cyber attacks in Israel, copying famous websites like Netflix and PayPal, and we should protect ourselves with any means necessary.
All right, so, are there any other countries in the world that are really using this type of technology to track their citizens to prevent the coronavirus?
Yeah, it's not a thing that is only Israeli. We see it in South Korea, we see it in Taiwan, we see talks about it in Japan, we see talks about it in China, which again, it's hard to say what's true out of there or not. But it's not a unique thing for Israel. It is unique considering the political situation we're in, and it is unique considering who and when will this thing blow off. Meaning, again, I don't see it. It's a lot like any other means of governing, like the police, like wiretaps. It's a matter of if there is a real need and do we use it to protect the public and not invade him.
All right, so
or invade his privacy.
So my final question, with just a short amount of time left, is it ethically permissible to choose to follow civilians in other cases, such as to prevent crime or to locate suspects at murder sites?
it's a big philosophical debate, right? When it comes to terrorism, is it ethically possible? We believe so. When it comes to crime, is wiretapping ethical? Depends on the situation. And this is a very, very weird situation. But I would recommend to any one of us citizens to protect our privacy in other means, not believe truly in the government, but just take some precautions. For example, here in Safe House, we provide our privacy tool for free in the Corona days. There are many other tools out there. Just protect your privacy and make sure that the government works for you, not you working for them.
All right, Liad, thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
Now, in spite of earlier expectations, Israeli President Rivlin is officially giving Benny Gantz the first mandate to form a coalition.
החוק נותן בידיך, אדוני, 28 ימים, החל ממחר, למלאכת הרכבת הממשלה. זהו זמן קצר.
Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz has received exactly 61 recommendations from the majority Arab joint list, the Israel Beitenu party, and Labor Gesher Meretz, giving President Rivlin an easy choice and handing Gantz the chance to negotiate a government. The news does come as a bit of a shock, though, as both he and Israel Beitenu leader Avigdor Lieberman have previously refused to be reliant on the joint list. The joint list until now has likewise been unwilling to give its full support, with Balad, one of the 4 parties within the joint list, refusing to recommend Gantz. But both the entire joint list and Lieberman are tipping the scales, while rejecting calls by Prime Minister Netanyahu for a secular unity government. In one of 2 options, the other being a 4-year rotational government, Netanyahu is pushing for an emergency 6-month coalition to deal with the coronavirus and pass a new budget. After the 6 months, we would return to the way things are now. While Lieberman and others may be blowing Netanyahu off for supposedly playing political games, but Rivlin is taking the offer seriously. The president has invited both Gantz and Netanyahu to his residence in Jerusalem in efforts to encourage an emergency unity government between the country's 2 largest factions. Following the meeting, the Likud and Blue and White parties are promising to meet soon and continue direct talks. In related news, just minutes after receiving the mandate from President Rivlin, Blue and White Party Chairman Benny Gantz is vowing to form as broad of a coalition as possible, and he's already phoned leaders from the Labor Gesher Meretz party and Avigdor Lieberman's Israel Beitenu party to let them know. But first, Israel's new Knesset members need to be sworn in, and that is not going to be an easy task. The feeling in Jerusalem is tense today as cleaners in hazmat suits began the day spraying disinfectant across the parliament building's main hall. You see, the Knesset is preparing for the monumental task of swearing in all 120 new members of the 23rd Israeli Knesset, and this job is infinitely more complicated given the health ministry's restrictions due to the coronavirus. So how does the new ceremony look? Well, instead of the typical event in which the entire Knesset is sworn in at once, the Knesset is running a marathon, 40 rounds of back-to-back swearing-in ceremonies, 3 new MKs at a time. And as you might expect, the events are expected to last long into the evening. And now with more on the coming coalition negotiations, we're joined by Jeremy Saltan, political strategist and director of English operations within the Yamina party. Jeremy, thank you for joining us. Now, Benny Gantz has 28 days to form a government, and he claims that he wants to form a government as wide as possible. Will he succeed?
No, he's not going to succeed. What he was able to do is get 61 recommendations so that he gets the first mandate. But the same 61 MKs that have recommended that he gets the first chance to form a mandate are very different from expecting the same 61 MKs to vote for a government in the Knesset with a confidence motion. We're talking about MKs on one side, such as Avigdor Lieberman, or right-wing MKs within Blue and White, such as Hauser and Hendel. And on the other side, you're looking at members of the joint list, including Balad, if we're talking about Shchadeh or Yazbak, who was barely able to go ahead and run for Knesset based on just one Supreme Court justice vote. So, yes, Gantz is able to get the mandate today, as opposed to Netanyahu getting it first the last 2 times, but there is no chance that he's going to be able to form a government in the next 28 days.
Well, I mean, so Benny Gantz, he's calling on the leaders of the religious parties like Aryeh Deri, Yaakov Litzman, to invite them, to even possibly negotiate a coalition, but they're so far refusing. Is that going to be the same story for everyone on the right-wing bloc?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that Gantz also spoke with Naftali Bennett today on the phone, and Bennett told him, and it's very clear, we've said this position publicly as well, and that is that we're not going to talk with him as long as he's going ahead and speaking and trying to include the joint list. as far as we're concerned, anyone who wants to join this national unity emergency government that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for, as long as they accept Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, they're a member that can be a part of this coalition. But as long as Gantz is going to go ahead and decide that he wants to spend time trying to include the joint list, there's really nothing to talk about.
So hold on. So if Gantz were to drop the joint list from these negotiations, or from his potential coalition, would Yamina support him? Would Yamina join his coalition?
What Naftali Bennett has called for is the same thing that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for, which
so
is
he wouldn't leave the bloc. So you're saying he wouldn't leave the right-wing bloc necessarily. He would stay in the right-wing bloc and form a broad unity, so to speak.
Indeed, we're talking about the bloc of 58 MKs that wants to see, even if we are talking about a situation of a national unity government with a rotation, that even if we are looking at that circumstance, that we would be doing so coming in with the entire bloc, but also that Netanyahu would have to be first. And that's why Gantz is doomed to fail, because by law, whoever receives the mandate must form a government with himself as prime minister. And there's absolutely no reason for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to step down and let Benny Gantz take over as prime minister at this time. As I mentioned, Gantz does not have an alternative government to be able to bring to a vote of confidence within the Knesset. What Gantz can do is really just delay for the next 42 days, but eventually the mandate will be returned to Benjamin Netanyahu.
All right, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so this next story is a bit funny because it's a cautionary tale against both panicking from coronavirus and, of course, thievery. Now, coronavirus headlines are plastered across the world media, giving way to both legitimate fears and complete melodrama. So terrified that the end of the world is near, an anonymous Israeli is now trying to balance out his karma by returning a 2,000-year-old artifact that he had stolen from the city of David 15 years ago as a, quote, rebellious youth. Using a go-between, the Israeli man has now returned a ballista stone. It was taken from the archaeological site of the Jerusalem Walls National Park. And the ballistae were ancient weapons used to hurl stones at fortresses, so the stolen stone was likely flung at the walls of Jerusalem by the Romans around 70 CE when they destroyed the city. Finally, though, while this story ended up with a happy ending, the IAA repeats what should be obvious. Uzi Rothstein, inspector with the Antiquities Authority Robbery Prevention Unit, explains that disconnecting an artifact from its archaeological framework by removing it negatively impacts research and the ability to piece together its historical puzzle. So basically, stop doing it. All right, so you or someone you know is in isolation or even quarantine. At this point, it's pretty normal, but far from the vacation that people are expecting, 2 weeks in isolation can be really hard on the mind. So, how do you stay sane? Joining us with the answers is Israeli psychologist Dr. Camila Fokosh-Lavan. So first, Camila, I just want to say that this is not a snow day or anything, right? You know, a day off from school for social distancing is to stop the spread of the virus. So don't break quarantine, right? But why is that so hard for people to understand? Because we're seeing people, really not understanding that they should be in isolation.
I think the whole situation is very, very strange psychologically because it's not something that you ever expect to be in the middle of. It's not something that you can prepare yourself, so to speak. Yes, it's not something that's in the social consciousness, if you will. Yes. So also it's a threat that you don't really see. So you don't know. Like we all saw the scary movies kind of a thing on one hand. On the other hand, it doesn't seem, the statistics don't seem to be that scary. So it's very confusing for people to decide where to be on this whole subject, to hide, to be scared. How much scared should I be or not at all? And it gets even more complicated, of course, with children involved.
Sure. All right, well, so you're advocating really amidst this crisis to take this time to do some internal spring cleaning. What do you mean by that?
So we're already here. It's obvious not something that anyone would choose to find themselves in the midst of, but we are already here. This is the situation, yes? So if you happen to be, for example, in quarantine, or a lot of us, even though officially we're not on quarantine because of the restrictions, many choose to just not go out or limit the going out part. So, get books, find hobbies, see maybe things that you always wanted to do in life and never really got a chance to, or just even to sleep. I speak to so many people, and frankly, I'm one of them, is that sometimes we just want to rest and have the time, but there's so much to do, and there's like we never have time to just rest and reflect, and this is the time. You have time to sleep in, do something, draw, paint, take up knitting, like figure out what it is that's good for you, for your soul, just literally for you, and not this is gonna finish. It's gonna end. So use this time, because then you're gonna feel bad. Like, okay, why didn't I just use this time to rest and to catch up on things, and to find the hobby maybe that I would like to do. Go on the internet, do the search, read the books, do some yoga. Just literally find what it is that you as a person would like to do.
All right, well, I think that's a pretty good message. Take this time for maybe some introspection and self-reflection instead of, hitting the beach in giant droves and possibly spreading the virus even more. Camila, thank you so much for joining us again. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, stay safe.
Now, in the midst of crisis, there is always a glimmer of light. And so here to share with us some of the lighter news around the coronavirus outbreak, we're joined by ILTV's Nittany Manson. Nittany, I'm so glad to have you back, let me just tell you.
Glad to be here, Aaron.
All right, well, take it away. What do we got?
Okay, so as we did before, we're just going to shine some light on some of the happier things. Of course, with everything that's going on, the Ministry of Health has come out saying that manicure and pedicure, massage places are closed.
Non-essential medical.
If it's not medically necessary,
right,
you can't do it.
Sure.
Well, people are very upset about this, and I understand them. But people have gone on the Facebook page of the Ministry of Health, and they've posted comments, some of which saying, posting pictures of their nails saying, "I can't go on like this. Ministry of Health, you're not getting near my nails." You can. So
you're telling me that Israeli women are trolling the Ministry of Health?
Oh, they're so angry. They're very upset. They're saying, no, Ministry of Health, I get that this is important, but my nails are more important. So they're very upset. They're saying, you can definitely see that the person who made these rules is a man. It's pretty funny. People are writing all over Facebook.
Okay, well, as I understand it, there's some more non-essential things that are still happening. Why don't we move on? What do we got?
Move on from the nails. Yeah. So weddings have been canceled. Anything with more than 100 people and now more than 10. Have been canceled. So people are doing their own weddings in a different way. Instead of canceling them, they're having them on balconies.
Yeah,
as you can see, people dancing on the balconies. They're all staying far-ish from each other.
I mean, I have to say, I can see that they're trying.
They're trying.
But it's still a pretty big group.
It's still a lot of people in one place, which is not great. But they're doing it on balconies with the band somewhere else. The people have even done it in grocery stores.
Wow.
Because in grocery stores, the rules are different. You can have more people in a grocery store.
Oh, that's genius.
Yeah, so there was one wedding that happened actually this weekend in a grocery store. So instead of canceling their happy day, they're just doing it a little differently.
Okay, so I know we have one more story.
One more, yeah. So MADA, the Magen David Adom, has come out with a new challenge. As we have the ice bucket challenge and all these different crazy ones. For health. For health. So MADA has made the hashtag Corona Connection Challenge.
Okay.
Basically just reaching out to people saying, do something kind for someone affected by corona, whether they're sick or just in quarantine. Stay away from them. They're saying do it safely. Don't go into their home if they're in quarantine, but do something nice for them, whatever it is.
Bring like a gift basket or something.
Leave it on the door, ring the doorbell and run. I don't know. But yeah, just doing kind things for others.
Well, that's a pretty awesome thing to challenge people to do. I think there are a lot of other challenges I think that could have been worse.
Definitely.
Nittany, thank you so much for shining some light here on all this dark clouds that we've got.
My pleasure.
All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be mostly clear with lows around 54 or 12 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow, the skies should still be mostly clear to partly cloudy, and you can expect temperatures to drop slightly to a high of 65 Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. So this is a sing-along from quarantine in Jerusalem's Ben Tabai Street. It looks like it was probably inspired from Italy, all the viral videos of the Italians singing in quarantine, but this is just amazing. All right, well, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.75 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.